Hey folks, welcome back once again to Indaba Africa. This is Chris, and this topic is on the United States. So let's talk a little bit about today, the 11th of August, 2020, when the presumptive nominee, that's right, he hasn't been selected as his party's nominee, but the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party has selected his running mate. Senator Kamala Harris from California is now the running mate for former Vice President and longtime Senator, never worked in the private sector, Joe Biden. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Biden has selected his running mate. Remember his criteria, not qualifications, not standards, not morals, not policy positions, simply gender and race. That's how he was picking his vice presidential running mate. And he's done that now. So let's talk a little bit about that. So the left is quite giddy tonight. The media is all full of exciting things for the left. They're absolutely convinced that they've locked in the election now for Joe Biden. Do they really think that we're that stupid? Well, I think they do think we're that stupid. The reality is that America is not that stupid. When your sole criteria for selecting a running mate is based on their gender and or their ethnicity or race, that leaves a lot to be desired from a candidate. Well, let's put that aside for just a moment, and let's talk about this selection of Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris. People are quite giddy about it. They think now that she will wipe the floor with Vice President Mike Pence in a vice presidential debate. Really? Yet again, the media and the left are clueless about Mike Pence, a man of morals, a man of character, a man who can hold his own in any debate with any candidate. Kamala Harris will find herself at a great disadvantage with her inability to stick to a single position and changing her positions with the wind, as we've seen over the years. Always in the end selecting whatever policy works for Kamala Harris. That's right. Also, the left is quite giddy that an African-American woman has been selected to be Joe Biden's running mate. Well, African-American? Really? The daughter of a Jamaican and a Tamil Indian, with no historical ties to the African-American community in this country and the history associated with African Americans. It's almost comical watching herself shift and change. Saw tonight on Twitter many people, Indian Americans, not Native American Indians, but Indians from India Americans, the subcontinent Indians, many all excited and giddy that the first ever Indian American had been put on a major party ticket. So what is it? Is she African American? No. Her father was Jamaican. Is she Afro-American? No. Her mother is Tamil Indian. Is she a lady of color? Yeah, you can make that argument. That's fair. And she's a woman. But her fraudulent attempts to link to the African-American community and to talk down in a language when it's right will fall on flat ears in much of the Black American community. Black Americans aren't that stupid. They're not that stupid. The brazen and shameless naked power grab marks her entire career as San Francisco District Attorney, California Attorney General, and then U.S. Senator. Whether it's burying Catholic priests' molestation cases, or it's undermining private charitable health care, or the outright lies on the way to the impeachment of President Donald Trump. She has a long history of pandering and playing to the game that's suitable for her interest, not for her constituents. She's also a Johnny-come-lately, having joined the empty-headed New Green Deal late in the game. You know the New Green Deal, the plan with no projections, no estimation of cost, and the ludicrous concept that the United States of America, the world's largest energy producer and the world's largest per capita energy consumer, would replace hydrocarbons by the year 2030 with solar and wind power, completely ignoring the possibility of nuclear and hydroelectric, actually greener sources of energy. Yeah, the empty-headed deal. So that's a little bit about Kamala Harris. And let's talk a little bit more about her past. Kamala Harris is a long-established person of privilege, a person whose connections, not her qualifications, have long profited her immensely. If you're curious about her, just do a little research. You can find a lot about her in places like award-winning author Peter Schweizer's Profiles in Corruption. This book, which came out not that long ago, fantastic selection of information, and Kamala Harris is the lead chapter in this book. Funny that she's the lead chapter. He talks in this book about when she was appointed by Mayor Willie Brown to the State Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board, which earned her $114,000 nearly 20 years ago, a year, for a couple times a year meeting for this board. Now, that's not unusual. People sit on these boards and they receive high remuneration for their time on the boards. But it is unusual for someone like her to have been appointed to the State Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board, particularly when it was through nepotism. She was also appointed to the California Medical Assistance Commission, which netted her $99,000 per year nearly 20 years ago. That's $213,000 a year. But wait, ladies and gentlemen, that figure, which already put her light years ahead of virtually every American in the country, but especially those working for the government, where the average salary then was far lower than it is today at $64,000 per American per capita. She also worked for the county, and as a county employee, she made $100,000 a year in 2002-2003 timeframe. So that is $313,000 a year for appointed positions. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Living quite the high life out there in the San Francisco Bay Area was Kamala Harris. Yes, indeed. Now, she served as the San Francisco District Attorney for a number of years, from 2004 to 2011. When she ran for that office in January 2003, she pledged that she would adhere to the city's, she signed a form actually, she would adhere to the city's pledge that candidates not spend more than $211,000 on their campaign. Yet she subsequently went on to raise more than $600,000. And her campaign was fined a then record $34,000 fine by the city for violating its campaign guidelines. In July 2019, she was quite upset about Alex Acosta, the labor secretary who had been in Florida previously, about what a light sentence he apparently handed out to Jeffrey Epstein in a molestation case years before. Now, if only she really gave a crap about child safety and about sexually molested minors. You see, she failed to prosecute a single case of priest abuse, Catholic priest abuse, the entire time that she was the district attorney of San Francisco or she was the Attorney General of California. In fact, she buried cases that her predecessor Terrence Hallinan had put together, many of which he'd prosecuted, other cases he built and prepared the files for prosecution, yet during the entire nearly 8 years she was district attorney, 8 years district attorney in San Francisco, never once prosecuted a single Catholic priest abuse case. So is San Francisco unique? Is it the only major city in America in which minors were not molested by priests? Find that hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen, particularly since prosecutable files were put together by her predecessor, who was run out of office. Interesting. She also has a very unusual and cozy relationship with unions. Interesting. Well, folks are really giddy about Kamala Harris, and perhaps Joe himself is cuckoo for Kamala. Don't really know. We'll see what happens. But I find it fascinating and interesting, to say the least, that the Democrats think they've now sealed themselves a victory by bringing Kamala Harris in. Of course, this is yet another effort to steal high elected office. And what am I talking about? As if the mail-in voter fraud isn't sufficient to secure a victory. As if the gerrymandering hasn't been sufficient to make states off limits. Now, both parties are guilty of that, so we could throw that dart in both directions. As if all the frivolous lawsuits against the current administration haven't been enough and undermine our domestic and foreign policy on an endless basis with lies and subterfuge. As if the fraudulent impeachment case, which was purely political and not based on a single nameable crime, as if none of that's enough. Now, of course, with Joe Biden clearly in some sort of difficulty, either physically or mentally, something is not right, they hope to garner the election so that he becomes president. Mark my words. Should Joe Biden become president, he'll resign within 90 to 120 days, having secured his legacy in history, having finally the noted plagiarist from Delaware, originally from Scranton, plagiarist in university days, and also plagiarizing Neil Kinnock's speech, claiming it was his own. Yes, the noted plagiarist, Sleepy Joe Biden, having secured his legacy of becoming president, having done nothing, accomplished virtually nothing his entire life, will resign from office, and Kamala Harris would become the president of the United States, thereby securing what the progressive left hopes is their man, or should I say their woman, in the White House. Now, they had 8 years of Barack Obama in their quest to undermine representative government in this country, and they succeeded in many ways. Now they'll get another stab at it if this happens. But ladies and gentlemen, they shouldn't be counting their chickens too fast. Joe Biden had a couple of choices here. Since his criteria for selecting a running mate was a woman, he had a few choices. Well, of course, the unstated goal was a black woman. That wasn't stated, but we know that's where he was going. You know, Joe's a friend of the black American community. What with hanging out at swimming pools and hanging out with Corn Pop and hanging out in swimming pools where the kids marveled at the curly hair on his legs. Creepy, creepy. Yes, but his criteria. So look back to his criteria. Well, the leading candidates to become his running mate, so we're told, were Stacey Abrams from Georgia, the disgruntled loser in the Georgia race, who still endlessly claims the race was stolen from her. She can't accept the fact that she lost. The only way she lost is racism, even though the majority of the population of the state didn't vote for her. Stacey Abrams, Susan Rice, or Kamala Harris were the three top choices, apparently. Well, Stacey Abrams would be disastrous for this country. God forbid that woman got anywhere near the White House, as a tourist, let alone as an elected official. Absolute disaster. She's a bigot. Everything comes out of her mouth is shameful and disgraceful. And she has a deep hatred of America, obviously, from the way she behaves. Susan Rice would have been the best choice, although she has baggage. She's articulate, she's coherent, she understands policy, and she's a D.C. swamp dweller. So she knows D.C. She knows where the bodies are buried, and she knows all the people in the Democratic Party. She would have been an excellent choice to be a vice president, and had Joe Biden become president, likely would have been a decent vice president for him, at least to pursue the policies that the Democrats are seeking to pursue in this country. Not so good for America, but good for the Democratic Party. Susan Rice would have been the best choice. But of course, she has baggage, and not a small amount of it, associated with the Clinton administration, famously making the, not verbatim quote, but the essence of the quote was, with the Rwanda massacre, as Bill Clinton and his administration sat on their hands, watching 850,000 people be butchered to death, most of them by machete, over a period of 6 weeks, claiming they knew nothing about this. And famously, she's quoted as having said something to the effect, well, if we call it a genocide, what happens to the midterm elections? In other words, if we admit it's a genocide and we sit here and do nothing, we'll lose. Well, son of a gun. It's good to see politics triumphs over policy. And of course, she's later affiliated with the Obama administration, and we saw what happened there. What about Benghazi? Remember she told us famously that Benghazi was all about a video that some obscure person made that offended Mohammed? No one even heard of this video. Certainly not people who would be irate enough to attack our consulate in Benghazi. Yes, that's what it was all about. Remember those lies? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Disproved almost instantly. So she has a lot of baggage, but she was clearly the best choice from a competency standpoint, and she would have made a good running mate. But no, Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe goes with the easiest candidate that we can go after and attack for her corruption, for her coziness to unions, for her political pandering. Well, we can even just use her own words, calling Joe Biden a racist, attacking him for his position on the 1990s crime bill, a position the Democratic Party supported. Yeah. So she goes after Joe Biden for that. Yes. So there's a lot here that is lacking when it comes to Kamala Harris. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I think that perhaps either the Democratic National Committee or Joe Biden are cuckoo for Kamala. And they're all giddy. They think they've secured the election tonight, when in fact they've likely secured their defeat in picking the worst of those three candidates. Stacey Abrams would have been dangerous as a progressive left, particularly with the bent that's happening in this country today. Susan Rice was the most competent candidate. But Kamala Harris, no positions, no morals, no values, shift with the wind. Whatever's in Kamala's interest is what she's for. Worst choice, Joe. Well done. Thanks a lot for that. And I guess when it's all over and the Democrats are still puzzled at how Donald Trump defeated them yet again, despite the fact that they tried to undermine his presidency throughout the 4 years, damaging our foreign policy, damaging our domestic policy, harming Americans, while Donald Trump marched merrily along. Despite that, and their inability, and Hillary Clinton's inability to accept that she was defeated by someone who ran the game better than she did. When they lose again in November, they'll be distraught. They'll claim voter fraud. They'll claim that Donald Trump didn't win. And they'll be shaking their heads. But the clear-headed members of the Democratic Party will be saying, why, oh why, did they pick Kamala Harris? Kind of like they blamed John McCain for picking Sarah Palin and blamed Sarah Palin for losing the election, which is nonsense. John McCain lost that election with his arrogant coming back to D.C. I'll solve this financial crisis, when Barack Obama kept his mouth shut and didn't lose votes. And that's when John McCain lost that election. Anyway, the day that Joe Biden lost the election, you could pick all kinds of days. Perhaps when he said, you're not black if you don't vote for me. Perhaps when he said the black American community is not diverse like the Hispanic community. Take your pick. Maybe it was corn pop. Maybe it was the curly hair on his legs. Maybe it's the creepy touching of minor children and women at every angle. But for certain, he put another nail in his coffin with the selection of Kamala Harris as his vice presidential running mate. Well, folks, I hope you found this interesting and thought-provoking. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, pushing that button right down there. Leave a comment if you'd like. And please smash the like button. Thanks a lot for your patrons. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.